Hello and welcome to the week 3 module, which is going to surround the study of the circle of life and cue the Lion King theme song. But really though, studying photosynthesis and its opposite chemically, which is... Alright, so after today's lecture you should have a better understanding of the following points. One is the basic overview of photosynthesis. And photo means light, synthesis means putting together. So what we're going to do in photosynthesis is harvest light and use it to rearrange molecules into other molecules. We're also going to talk about how it is that plants actually capture energy from sunlight, and then how they convert that sun energy into chemical energy in those new molecules that they're assembling. And then lastly, we're going to talk about an adaptation on the regular version of photosynthesis, wherein certain plants actually use photorespiration as an adaptation so that they can be better able to survive and reproduce in really dry, arid, hot climates. So although you may not have thought about this before, really all the energy that every living thing on Earth uses ultimately stems back to light energy from the sun. So in terms of photosynthesis, it's not just plants that are photosynthesizing and pumping out oxygen and glucose or sugar, it's also algae and some bacteria. And really, algae is a phenomenal photosynthesizer, and it's the type of organism that gives us a lot of the breathable oxygen in our atmosphere. Reverting back to one of our previous lectures together, I want to remind you of this idea of ingredients and products, and matter being neither created nor destroyed. So in the top equation there, you see some ingredients to make an apple pie. Apples and flour and butter and sugar, and you mix those together and you get a pie. Well, before you can actually get the pie or the product, you have to infuse some energy into there. And so we would use an oven to bake that pie. So below you see this example of reactants and products, and here we have this hydrogen right here, as well as an oxygen molecule, and those are getting added together to form water and energy. So that's one of our examples from earlier in the semester. And if you look on the bottom here, you see reactants and products of the actual chemical reaction or equation that photosynthesis uses. So basically what photosynthesis is self-feeders or autotrophs taking in atmospheric carbon dioxide and water from the ground, for example, and using light energy to convert these reactants or these products, reactants into these products. C6H12O6 is our glucose, and then oxygen is a byproduct which we use to breathe. A great supplement that you might want to add in here in your study of photosynthesis is a video done by Bozeman Science, and it is entitled Photosynthesis. It was filmed by Paul Anderson, and he is a phenomenal lecturer using common words and vernacular to describe these kind of conceptually difficult topics of biology. If you remember one of the first activities I had you do, it was called Zoom. What we're going to do here is another version of Zoom. So here's a tree, and we're going to zoom in on the leaf, zoom in even farther into the tissue of the leaf, zoom into one cell in that leaf, and then zoom in even farther to that photosynthesizing organelle, which is the chloroplast. Alright, so within the chloroplast are these stacks of grana, and within those granum are this thylakoid, and this thylakoid membrane and within the thylakoid are where both parts of photosynthesis are going to be occurring. That light energy that chloroplasts are going to be absorbing is in the form of really energetic photons, and those photons have varying energy levels according to an electromagnetic spectrum, which I'll show you on the next slide. How these photons get absorbed is through pigment molecules that are embedded in the thylakoid membrane. And these pigment molecules are commonly chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. They reflect the color green, and they absorb all the other wavelengths of light, all the other colors, like red and blue and yellow. When I mentioned that photons of different colors have different wavelengths and different energy levels, this is what I'm referring to. So the visible light, or the light that we can see, falls right here on this electromagnetic spectrum. It's only a tiny portion of all the photons that there are that have different energy levels. So if you look far to the left here, gamma rays are actually very energetic, and so you can see that they have short wavelengths and carry a lot of energy, whereas radio waves down here, for example, don't carry much energy. They have really long wavelengths, and so the light that is actually absorbed by those chlorophyll molecules, those pigment molecules in the thylakoid membrane, that light is the visible light except for green. Green is the color that is reflected to our eyes. The actual structures in thylakoids that capture those energetic photons are called photosystems. And so there's photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. Photosystem 2 is actually the first photosystem that harvests those photons, and that energetic photon comes in and kind of bounces all around those chlorophyll molecules, and an electron receptor releases an electron very energetically, and it's going to go pass it on. That electron gets passed through this system called the electron transport system, or ETC, or ETS, excuse me. And that excited electron goes to photosystem 2, and actually it's still excited, and in that process it is allowing ATP to form, as well as NADPH. And another byproduct of this system is that down here, water is broken up into hydrogen ions and oxygen, and so that is where we see that oxygen byproduct of photosynthesis. So this first set of reactions in the photosynthetic process is what we call the light reactions. They need light in order to occur. So recapping, here is our chloroplast with the thylakoid stacks of grana, and that excited photon coming in and releasing that electron from this water splitting enzyme, and that excited electron being moved through this electron transport chain, or ETC, forming ATP and NADPH. And now we are ready to send these molecules to the light independent reactions, or what's called the Calvin cycle. Alright, so now that we are at the Calvin cycle, we bring in that ATP and that NADPH from the light dependent reactions, and we use those as well as ATP and carbon dioxide to actually make a sugar called glucose, or C6H12O6. An adaptation, though, on this whole process is necessary for plants that live in hot temperatures. So under hot, arid conditions, the stomata of the plants, which are little openings on the underneath part of the leaves, actually will lose water during the heat of the day. So what they do is they actually are going to close those up during the day and only open them at night so that they don't lose water, but so that they can also get CO2 in, so that they can actually start producing that glucose and undergo that process of photosynthesis nonetheless. So this type of photorespiration is what we call C4 photosynthesis, and plants like sugarcane, corn, and many grasses can still fix carbon, but they just do it in a slightly different manner than regular photosynthesis. And lastly, another strategy to avoid losing water in really arid temperatures is for certain plants to use the process called CAM photosynthesis. And so they'll use the C4 pathway at night and the C3 pathway during the day. So yet another adaptation so that plants don't lose water, but they still get in the CO2 that they need in order to construct that organic molecule of glucose, which they will use for food for themselves. Alright, to segue into the next section, which is cellular respiration, what I want you to think of is that equation for photosynthesis, where plants take in CO2 and water, and they use those molecules to basically, they rearrange them using sunlight into glucose and oxygen. So if you take the reverse of that equation, that's what we call cellular respiration. And so we need plants and autotrophs to photosynthesize, but they don't need us. plants can also cellularly respirate. Now, we can't do photosynthesis, but our cells do cellular respiration. So we need plants, but they don't need us. And so putting this in the context of, what happens to matter when that organism dies? Well, in photosynthesis, matter is taken and rearranged and then used by us, for example. When we die, though, just like in The Lion King, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass, and we're all connected in the circle of life. So that's circle of life is the big picture, and the photosynthesis cellular respiration relationship is the tiny microscopic picture of the circle of life. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and on we go to the next segment of this module.